Hello, hello, y'all. Welcome to part 3 of our sex series. I'm hearing some great reports, and so I am bringing back the fan favorite, Teri Cress, the sex therapist that I had on in part 1. And she comes back on the pod this week, and we talk more things sex, and we get a little bit deeper into some things. We talk about infidelity. We talk about sexual betrayal. We talk about porn. We talk about how to get sex drives back, managing our expectations around it, sexual addiction. And as you heard her in part 1, she is absolutely incredible at putting words to things and also just baiting what can be a really heavy topic in a lot of hope. So enjoy my second talk in part 3 of our sex series with Teri Cress. I'm so glad you're back.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Are you still up in Washington?
I'm still up here in the cold. We have
Nice.
winter happening right now. So
my parents are there, and they said it's snowing in their town.
yeah. We haven't had too much, but in the area
Okay.
where I live.
Yeah.
But
My husband was just up there with our kids at the Seahawks game.
oh, they were fun.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, he
exciting.
was doing a chapel up there for the opposite team, the Raiders.
Okay.
And he's a huge Seahawks fan.
Oh, that's
But
funny.
the Raiders had asked him to do it. I know. And so he was like, okay, but if the Raiders win, then my kids are every Seattle Seahawks fan
Yeah.
that he knows is going to be so mad at him, and they won. But my kids loved going to the game, and they saw all kinds of things they'd never seen before.
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
Those Seattle fans.
Yeah.
But okay, I know we have a limited amount of time, so I want to do some follow-ups.
Okay.
And I jotted notes last time we talked, and because there were so many other questions, I feel like we just broke the surface
Yes.
regarding this entire topic. And so I wanted to kind of bring up some of because I feel like we unpacked like sex, communication around sex, those, but I really wanted to get your opinion as well on some of the difficult aspects, such as like sexual addiction, pornography, the effects of it, recovering from infidelity, sexually, how do we go through those things? And then I've had some people just reach out to me, or I asked a few people and they texted me back and said they would love to hear a little bit. So do you care if we just jump right in?
Just jump in. Sure.
Okay. I guess one of the things we can start with that one of my friends asked, this isn't a super heavy one, but when she got married, she loved sex. And then just over time, desire dwindled. And she just has zero desire anymore. And we kind of touched on this in the last one, but my specific question around it would be, if you've lost a sex drive, how do you get it back?
Yeah, that's a great question, because our sex drive ebbs and flows through life. So it is going to, be pretty powerful before marriage when we're coupling with the person we choose, and then the beginning, and then, children come, stressors come, life stages, different, health issues, and then hormone issues. Like, say our hormones are kind of plummeted for whatever reason, stress or nursing for, a baby or whatever it is.
Right.
Pregnancy. Right. Pregnancy, all of that.
Yeah.
So if our hormones are off and not optimal, we are going to feel even depressive, low energy, just not interested at all. Plus our body just has a harder time responding. And so that's a curious, to be curious about that and to just know where am I optimally, what's the best hormone level for me, and what am I missing? And that plays a role definitely in desire.
Is it the same for men?
It is the same for men. Yes.
Interesting.
Men start losing their testosterone about 30. Every year it diminishes. And so if I have, and I mean, just to emphasize this, a 70-year-old male is the highest suicidality.
Oh, wow.
So in my
Wow.
theory, I've never read this, but in working with so many men through the years, my theory is
Yeah.
and I found it to be true that if I say, let's go check your testosterone levels, your hormone
Yeah.
levels, and they're bottomed out. And it's like, give them
Oh my
some
goodness.
natural bioidentical hormones, and they're feeling life again, and they're feeling like they have something to
Wow.
live for. And testosterone is both the male and the female's energy hormone. And so,
Oh, so women have
yes,
testosterone.
we do.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, I'm just learning all kinds of
Yes,
things.
we
Oh,
do.
I thought ours was like estrogen
It is
and men's were
estrogen. Yes.
so do they have estrogen?
Yes, men have a little bit, not as much
Oh,
as
okay.
females.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Interesting.
so
So, yeah,
yeah.
can you explain that? That's so interesting.
Well, I'm certainly not the doctor on this subject, but I do
Right,
I
right.
do know that it does affect our desire levels and our energy levels and our zest for life. And so
Yeah.
even for a female who just doesn't have any testosterone or her progesterone is too high, so she's more
Yeah.
prickly and just her skin can't be touched because she's got different levels of different hormones in her body. So that knowing that is really helpful. The other thing, getting back to your friend, is so to accept the idea that desire or yeah, desire is probably the best word, ebbs and flows through life. What we want to
Mhm.
make sure that we are aware of is just our cognitions around it. So,
Okay.
say our desire kind of faded away, and then we just, excuse me, we either accept it or we put make a story regarding it, like, oh,
Mm.
I'm just not attracted to my husband as much, or oh, I don't have time for that, or
Mhm.
I've been touched by kids all day. I don't need to be touched anymore. Like some kind of
Yeah.
story that spins it in
Mm.
a put it on the shelf kind of attitude. Like just put it,
Yeah.
instead of saying, you know what, this is still I know it's important in our marriage. It's like the lubrication that keeps our marriage healthy, or the
Yeah.
water for a
Yeah.
plant. It's like if the marriage is
Yeah.
the plant, we've got to water it. And so
Right.
making it intentional and going,
Uh-huh.
okay, I can own this for myself. Why is my desire um, you know, what's going on right now that's affecting it? Is it that we've
Right.
gotten into a rut and it's just not, the touch isn't stimulating anymore, or or we do we have interpersonal relationship issues that we have to work through where we're
Right.
just not that comfortable being that intimate anymore? Where
Right.
you see me, we stop kissing in our marriage. It's like, have I stopped kissing? Let's start kissing again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have we stopped having fun? Fun is like
Mhm.
so sacred for marriage because we didn't
Yeah.
choose each other outside of having fun. And so
Yeah, that's
in
so true.
investing in things that are fun for both partners and appreciating, creating a fun date that meets both those needs, each other's
Right.
needs. Maybe it's a
Right.
Seahawk game and dinner out, or maybe
Right. Right. Right.
it's like a blend of the two individuals. So just making it, just kind of going, okay, staying curious and
Yeah.
staying in a reaching intentionality that this
Mhm.
matters to us as one
Right.
individually for your own health, it matters, as
Yeah.
well as the relationship health, it matters. And so
That's so
exploring
good.
why and also being very kind and gracious to yourself as that desire does ebb and flow, because and along with that is expanding our understanding of what sexuality or sex with our husbands or spouse or wives are, because
Mhm.
we get too focused on the genital component of
Mm.
it versus
Yeah.
um, just the sensuousness of having
Mm.
a human being that we get to touch and
Yeah.
feel and vice versa, and arouse and play and explore together. And so one idea also is like reading a good book on healthy sexuality, like
Yeah.
having a language around it is
Mm.
absolutely crucial. In fact, there's
Mm.
a new book coming out, the first of 23, and it's called Secrets of Sex and Marriage by Dr. Shante Feldon and Michael
Oh,
Seitzma.
great.
It's going to be a
Oh.
must read for couples
Oh,
because it's
good. Oh my goodness. I'll pre-order it.
yeah, it's so fantastic. And I'm a part of getting to read it for the pre-launch, which is really exciting.
Oh, so you love
I
it?
love it, and
Oh,
it
good.
normalizes. It's like
Yeah.
it not only normalizes, but it gives so many practical advices. And Mike Seitzma has been 35 years as a Christian sex therapist, and Shanti
Wow.
Feldon is a researcher who's gathered between the two of them, they've gathered like four different
Wow.
studies to culminate in this book. And it
Wow.
talks about what is normal and what is
Yeah.
beneficial and what how can we increase our sexual relationship and our marriage. And the number one aspect is learning to talk about it. And so
Yeah.
even for me
Yeah.
in working with couples, like they just, we can be sexual without any language, but to create
Right.
a language around it and then to establish what type of language, like, is it kitty language? Is it euphemisms? Is it,
Mm.
technical? Like what kind of
Right, right.
language? I had
That's
one
so
colleague, she
good.
can't stand the language of panty, but she's okay with underwear. Like
Yeah,
to
yeah.
fine tune it where you do have a language that's not aversive to either partner, where
Yeah.
you can really value and hear each other, and to have a language around even your own description of your desire, like what does
Right.
your husband or your wife do that inspires arousal, that inspires
Uh-huh.
longing, connection. How can we
Right.
increase that connection? What's normal? Like what feels normal to us? And that's going to be an individual couple, because every couple, it's like I like the thought of our sexuality and marriage kind of like a dance. There's tons of
Right.
different varieties of dances, right?
Right.
You've
Right.
got all kinds of like the swing, the playful, kind of coming in and out. You got the waltz that's more, technical and
Right.
repetitive. You've got goodness, the salsa. There's so many different dances, and for
Right.
each couple, when maybe one of them is a salsa and one of them is a waltz, well, how do you bring those together to create a
Oh,
whole new dance that's just
yeah.
you, that's just
Right.
sacred to your
And it starts with
union?
language being
It
put around it.
totally starts with language.
Huh, that's
Yeah.
so interesting. That's a hard, like, because I'm not the communicator in my marriage.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more of like a stuffer.
Uh-huh.
Like the world could be burning around me, and I will be convinced everything's fine.
Yeah.
I'm just so good at that. Like it's my best skill set is denial.
Awesome.
But my husband's the communicator, and
Uh-huh.
he's more of the feeler as well, and so he's high communication. And we've had lots of talks, and that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that I'm always trying to improve on is like talking. And sometimes he has to talk to me like a little kid, like you look sad. Did
Uh-huh.
something happen?
Uh-huh.
And then I'm like, no. And he's like, well, what did you do today? Right? Like he
Yeah.
literally will have to unpack and try and find it because I sometimes don't even know, you know,
Yeah.
much less for talk about sex, which is a whole nother layer of communication. So this is really challenging for me and
Yeah.
so good.
Yes. So just a practical tool is to
Yeah,
get a book and read it out loud to each other.
that's great because
Yeah,
they're having the conversations for you a bit.
exactly. And then
Oh, that's
and
really
then you
great.
can you can take a couple pages and read about what stood out to you, and just
Right,
kind of normalize the language so that you expand on self-awareness and other
right.
awareness. And there's a few
That's
books I
great.
would recommend on that. Definitely this new one that's coming out would
Yep.
be great. The Celebration of Sex by Dr. Doug Rose, the late Dr. Doug Rosenau,
Okay.
is kind of a classic textbook for Christian couples.
Great.
And then I love the book. I don't even know if I think it's still in print, but it's called When Two Become One by Christopher and Rachel McCluskey.
Okay.
And he's
This
he's a
great.
sex therapist, Christian sex therapist, which
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate reading books if they're going to be about sex, that they're
Yeah.
from a Christian
Yeah, for
trained
sure.
sex therapist, because some people that write books out there, they can be hurtful because
Mm,
they're very biased to their own
yeah.
way of seeing things versus
Yeah.
being trained to encompass a wide variety of different,
Right.
and even as I talk about this, like I'm aware and praying for those people that are hearing this, that are maybe even
Mm-hmm.
feeling wounded a little bit because, man, they've been hurt by it. And so I
Yeah.
just being
That's so
aware.
real.
So when we read a book around sexuality, especially when we want to create a language around it, I think it's
Right.
really helpful to read some good Christian sex therapists.
That's great. Oh, I love those
Mhm.
recommendations. I'm going to get this new one you're talking about for our premarital couples.
Yes.
That's like I cannot wait to
Yeah.
dig into that one.
Yeah.
Okay,
Hmm.
that's really helpful.
Yeah.
It feels so obvious, the communication or it should be, but it's the hardest
It
one.
is. It
It's
is.
so much easier to go get my hormones tested than open up about
Yeah.
something,
Yeah,
right? Just put a needle,
exactly.
draw my blood, don't make me talk.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, well, that's really, really helpful. And
Hmm.
with the hormonal side, do you just recommend people go and just get checked?
Yeah, find,
Just get
yeah,
tested,
just
their
get,
levels?
yeah,
Okay.
and it does help to have somebody that's trained in bioidentical, or in just inner, like a naturopath that's trained in it, or
Yeah,
internist that's trained in it. Not every doctor is going to be trained in hormone treatment.
right.
But
Okay.
yeah, and when I say that, it's not the only thing. Like exercise, our sexuality and our arousal are tied to our circulation. And so if we have
Mm.
heart
Oh,
issues,
wow.
or if we're sedentary, we want to get our blood pumping, literally. And
Yes.
so
Interesting.
exercise, eating right, um,
Hmm.
gratitude, living in a heart of gratitude, and
Yeah.
looking at beauty, looking for
Mm.
beauty and finding it, and
Mm.
thinking, the Philippians 4:14, where whatever is noble and
Right.
right and
Yes.
praiseworthy and all of that, think on those
Yes.
things. And so that translating to our spouses, as we think of them and see them, are we focused on what's lovely and beautiful about them? Or
Hmm.
are we nitpicking and
Yeah.
critical and, wanting them to be so different than they are, which
Right.
absolutely happens to all of us.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And,
Yep.
and so what, being kind of being self aware as to what our overrides are. Are they negative
Mm.
overrides about our spouse, or are they positive overrides?
That's great.
And
And have you
mm,
seen people like recover a sex drive?
oh, yes. Oh, my goodness,
Total
yes.
hope for it then, like total hope for it.
Oh, total hope for it.
That's awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's just staying curious and figuring out what
Yes.
it is, what needs to be
That's so good.
changed or inspired, or,
That's so, so good.
yeah,
Can I ask you a practical, another one, and then I'll get into
sure.
some of like the heavier ones. But just the practicality, because we talked about orgasm and our last session, and how women are just so beautifully complicated,
Yes,
right?
right.
And layered. And I've been talking to a few different people over like the last few years,
Hmm.
and I know some, and women specifically, um for a woman who can't orgasm,
Yeah.
who feels literally like it's impossible, like it's an impossibility.
Hmm.
Like what would you how would you talk somebody through that?
Well, I would definitely invite them to go see a pelvic floor specialist.
Oh, great. Okay.
They're out
A
there.
pelvic
Uh huh.
floor specialist.
Yes.
Okay.
And to be examined and to figure out their own anatomy.
Great. Okay.
know it, see what's happening. Is it really biological, or is it psychological, or is it social, or
Right.
is it emotional, or is it trauma, or
Right.
is it like,
Right.
but I would start there, and then
Okay. That's
I
great.
would invite them to see a Christian sex therapist.
That's great.
Uh-huh, for
Okay.
sure.
So that's something that you would say that's when it's time to go in.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Oh, that's really
yeah,
good. Yeah,
because
because it's important for women to enjoy it, like we talked about last time.
absolutely, for sure. Yep.
That's
Yep,
great.
yep.
That's good. Good. Okay. Talk really quick about, because we're here. There's so many words out there now that are just we're using all the time.
Yeah.
Like triggered and all
Yes.
these different things, right? I hear sex addiction a lot. Like,
Yes.
oh, my husband was a sex addict,
Yeah.
or I'm a sex addict, or
Yeah.
they're a sex addict, and all these different things. How would you really break down what is a sexual addiction and what are the ways that it manifests
Yes. Great question.
versus just somebody who just likes to sleep around a lot?
Yeah. Well,
Or maybe that is a sex addiction.
that is
I want your opinion.
that is a sex
It is.
addiction.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So by definition, any addiction masters us. Okay. It's like
Yeah.
it controls us, and it's
Yeah.
progressive. So by
Mm,
definition, any addiction masters us, and is progressive. And so there's
interesting.
like
Okay.
300 addictions out there. Sex
Oh,
addiction
wow.
being like the cocaine of all addictions. Like sugar
Uh-huh.
addiction's the number one addiction. So
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Huh.
so it's like so sexual addiction is basically a compulsive behavior
Mm-hmm.
that is progressive. It's not just stayed.
Okay.
Think of the easier thing to think of is an alcoholic. Like maybe they get
Mm-hmm.
drunk, with a half a bottle of wine, and then eventually they need at least one or two or three,
Mm-hmm.
or one thing
Yeah.
of beer, and now
Or
they
the hard
need,
stuff
yeah,
or yeah.
exactly. And so it's
Yeah.
progressive, and that's a key reality.
Okay.
So
Component. Okay.
even porn addiction. So
Mm-hmm.
porn addiction is so powerful because it's novel. There's the novelty component to it.
Hmm.
So it's click novelty. So the plethora of spices out there that a person
Yeah.
can partake of, um, is that itself is progressive. It's addicting. It's
Right.
like I have to have more and more and more and more and more. And what
Right.
satisfied a year ago isn't enough. I have to have something else. And
Right.
so it's that basically that energy that propels us to keep reaching for that drug to alter.
Right.
And so it's basically another way to say it is an unwanted sexual behavior.
Okay.
and
Yeah.
and 40% of sex addicts are female, so it's not just a male
Interesting.
issue out there, especially in our day and age with the
Right, right. I like that you're bringing that up because men can get trashed all the time.
right, right,
Like, oh, men are this and men are that,
right.
and it's like that's not the
Yeah,
case.
yeah,
We're all in this together.
that's right. And for females
Yeah.
it can look a lot different in that, the best book out there is Marnie Feldman's, not Feldman, yeah, Farrar is her last name, called No Stone. And she
No
talks
stone. Okay.
about, she is a recovered female sex addict herself. She has a huge
Okay.
ministry called the
Wow.
Bethesda Workshops that
Wow.
she helps women
Hmm.
find victory over their compulsive behaviors. And she's written a book that basically sets out, there's 5 types or 5 flavors, if you will, of female
Uh-huh.
sex addiction. And so they can look anything from like sleeping around all the time to a love relationship addiction. It's not about even
Mm-hmm.
having sex, it's just about the
Right.
hunting or whatever. So, and then as well as masturbation or other, there's 5, and I'm not going to
Right.
recall them all right now,
Okay.
but
That's a good I love the resources you're throwing out.
yeah,
This is
that's
helpful.
really helpful. She has a great resource. She's lovely person, and loves God, and has really um had a wonderful
That's great.
ministry in that. So going back to what is sex addiction, I hope I answered that.
No, that was
Yeah.
no, that was really helpful. And then onto the porn thing.
Mm.
I'm just curious on your take and like as far as recovery as well. Um
I had on the podcast a couple years ago, a porn star turned pastor.
Wow.
And she came on and just talked about her experience in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
She was like named one of Maxim's like top 10 porn stars of the year when she was in it. I mean, so she was deep in it, all of it, the drugs and the abuse. And she tells her story, and it's so powerful. And now she has a ministry to porn stars.
Oh,
But she
cool.
kind of gave the story of her story.
Yeah.
But as far as somebody like professionally looking at pornography, can you just like speak to that? Like, what does it do? Why is it so damaging? And how does one start to recover? Because that's the one we probably hear the most
Mm-hmm.
as far as addictive behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
is porn.
Mm-hmm.
So how does one start to walk out of that? Nobody wants to be a porn addict. It's
Yes.
embarrassing,
Yes.
And I have such a heart for this subject
Mm-hmm.
because good people get caught in it,
Oh, yes. Yes. It's so
which I'm sure you
accessible.
see a lot.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And it doesn't matter if they're in the ministry or out of the ministry or
Oh
secular.
yeah.
It's just so
Yep.
pervasive and
Yeah.
so easy and secret. And the power of it is in that novelty component for sure. That's
Hmm.
part of it. So the first step in walking it out is the concept of regret and remorse, repentance. So that's
Okay.
so regret is kind of like the finality of the acting out. There's
Hmm.
always there's going to be, it could be 2 years later, it could be 2 minutes later, 2 seconds later, that sense of remorse or regret that I just did it again, and that it's not
Mm.
sustaining. It doesn't satisfy. There's just an emptiness that happens post
Hmm.
acting out. And so if the person is regretful quickly, like within moments, we
Hmm.
want to celebrate that versus two
Yeah.
weeks later, 2 months later, 2 years later, and they're walking in a unrepentant, basically non-remorseful,
Mm.
experience. They're so far from recovery. They're so far from recovery. The closer
Mm.
the regret, remorse is to the acting out, they're closer to recovery. They're
Okay.
even maybe walking in recovery and still
Okay.
slipping up.
Right.
And so that's an important concept. And then the idea that our sex addiction is a creative, productive passion. And this is
Mm.
from Dr. Mark Laser, who he's passed. He and his wife Deborah have a ministry to couples, but he's written several books. One is Healing from Sex Addiction, from a Christian worldview. He was trained
Mm.
under Pat Carnes, who's the secular coined the idea of sex addiction.
Okay.
So really, really worth knowing and reading his material if someone's
Great.
struggling with sex addiction. But he says
Yeah.
that it's a creative, productive passion. And so
Hmm.
if that energy is there, a creative, productive passion is actually a beautiful
I was going
concept.
to say it sounds so positive.
Exactly.
Right.
And
Right.
so what we want to do is replace
Okay.
that bent, that flavor of creative productive passion,
Okay.
and create other ways to bring that
Like
create
channel it.
channel it. Yeah, good word, channel
Okay.
it. So is
Okay.
that through music? Is it through art? I had
Mm.
one female sex addict who, when she was walking through this process, she just had a coloring book and she'd grab her coloring book and start
Oh.
coloring when she was,
Yeah.
when she was triggered, I use that word,
Yep.
to act
Yeah.
out. And so it got her distracted. Once there's kind of a pathway, I think
Hmm.
of, if you think of a continuum, there's kind of a start and then there's the end of that regret, remorse. And so this continuum really applies to any sin. And it definitely
Uh-huh.
applies to, at some point, the continuum becomes an addiction. It masters us and
Hmm.
it's progressive. But the idea that we all have a core sense of shame, and then from that we bury that shame by coping
Yeah.
skills. And
Yep.
coping skills can be both positive and negative coping skills. But when the coping skills cease to function to bury that shame, we are triggered.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Oh, I use the word like 10 times a day at
okay.
least.
And the
It's
triggers,
my go-to word these days.
right, for a sex addict, the triggers are, am I hungry? I'm hungry. I have a weaker sense of my humanity because I'm hungry. I'm
Uh-huh.
angry. I'm
Oh.
lonely. I'm tired, or I'm just plain bored. And so
Oh,
if we're
interesting.
triggered to act out, if we're triggered, we want to say, what's
Yeah.
happening right now in my world? Am I just hungry?
Okay.
Am I lonely and I need to reach out to a friend? Am I tired
Mm,
and I just need to put my computer away and go have a nap or sleep or
right.
whatever it is?
Right.
Like, so that's so it's HALT, HALT plus a B.
Oh,
And that's
that's
just a
great.
good,
Okay.
helpful tool to kind of say, to be more self-aware and to notice what my experience is right now as I'm tempted. But once I step to the next step, which is preoccupied, and I'm
Oh.
preoccupied with going to Target, to that aisle, to the candy
Mhm.
aisle where my favorite candy is, right? Like,
Right. Right. Right.
I'm going to figure out how to act. I'm going to do a ritual. I'm going to, like, I need to go to Target for some groceries, or I need to, like, I'm going to have
Yeah.
a ritual, or I'm going to go check my emails. And there's this ritual of getting there eventually, because in the back of my mind, I'm preoccupied with the acting out. And so once I
Hmm.
step through the rituals, then I act out, and then regret is the next
Hmm.
aspect of that. So the key is to, if possible, be self-aware at that point of
Yeah.
trigger. Once the preoccupation comes, it's way, 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 way harder to not
Hmm.
follow what we call the zone of acting out, which is that
Yeah.
ritual acting out regret. And so, if somebody can, that's working it out, that's walking in recovery and practicing recovery. And there's a lot of help out there. The other piece about sex or porn addiction is we can't do it alone in isolation.
Oh, yeah.
That
Yeah.
being in community is essential,
Yeah.
because we didn't get there outside of relationship. There was
Yeah.
something we were reaching for, maybe
Hmm.
the face of desire, or the face of a smile, or a face of
Hmm.
welcome, whatever it is that we're seeing on the other side of the screen. um, that desire was real, and it was something that we missed maybe in our story growing up,
Yeah.
or in our relationships. They weren't there. We didn't have that loving parent that would have given us those beautiful eyes, looking back with eyes of love, like God does for us,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so we want to know our story, and it all makes sense. So when I'm working with someone, and I just, they share with me what their acting out really looks like, and
Yeah.
I overlap that with their story, and I know what their story is,
Yeah.
it all makes sense. It's not,
Hmm.
there's dots.
It always makes sense.
It all, like, the dots are all
Wow.
connected, and it's like,
Yeah.
can you see where this hunger, this desire, this longing wasn't met back here in your
Yeah.
story? And so if we can
Yeah.
heal that, right, we can go back and heal the
Yeah.
trauma of that. um, that's absolutely beneficial, and gives a person more
So good.
power to
It's more
master
than
it.
just putting covenant eyes on your computer.
Way more,
It's more than that.
way,
Yeah.
way more. Yeah,
It's overlapping the story. Yeah.
yeah,
And that's hard.
it
It's
is.
hard to go back.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Oh,
And yet I love Dan Siegel. He's a secular neuroscientist, psychiatrist.
yeah.
He coined the term interpersonal neurobiology, where we actually
Oh,
can
wow.
measure our neurons, and they line up with the person we're talking with. Like, if we measured them,
What?
yeah. And so
Really?
secular man, he goes as
Yeah.
far as to say we are never just individuals.
Oh,
And
wow.
I go, of course, scripture
Of course
tells
we're
us
not.
that
Yeah.
already. We are part of a body.
Right.
And we
Oh
all
my
have
goodness.
different, influences as we
Right.
influence others. And I kind of lost my train of thought there. Oh,
That's
his
so,
coin. His
yeah.
thought was that we're all born looking for someone looking for us.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's
it
beautiful.
is. And so
Mm-hmm.
kind of at the core, the base of this hunting and trying to
Mm-hmm.
gather that
Yeah.
reality or that hope, is that porn, the energy behind that porn. So if we can see ourselves, if we can have
Mm-hmm.
a witness of someone else seeing us and our story and
Yeah.
the harm that was done, I like Jay Stringer's book Unwanted, and it unpacks this
Okay.
idea that we all have a story of harm,
Hmm.
and it can propel us to unwanted sexual behaviors, and to
Yeah.
know what that story is and to be able to make sense of it. He talks in his book about a man that he's working with that goes and gets in his car and looks for a prostitute on the corner, and
Mm-hmm.
has a relationship with her, and so in unpacking that story, um, he, as a boy, his mom's not available. She's a working mom, maybe a single mom, I can't remember. So he gets in his bike and peruses the neighborhood, basically looking for a mama to welcome him in.
Yeah.
And so, like
Yeah.
a friend's mom to welcome him in, to make him feel like he
Right.
belongs somewhere. And so it's a repeat of that story. So
Huh.
it makes sense when we
It
unpack
does.
it.
Yeah. It's just a different manifestation than when you're little boy,
Yes,
but it's still
exactly.
the looking for something that you don't have.
Well, and speaking of being a little boy or a little girl, we only
Yeah.
have so many resources to kind of feel better, and
Right.
you know
That's so true.
emotionally and physically. And so eating is one thing that we can do,
Yeah.
or our sexuality or our body. So,
Yeah.
we only have limited resources, and what worked for us as a child eventually doesn't work and
Yeah.
is more harmful. Hmm.
Yeah. And you've seen people be totally freed from porn addictions as
Yes.
well.
Oh, yes.
Great. I just always we have two, and I always just love to get it like make it so hopeful.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
such a dark cloud, and like
Yes.
it is more than possible to overcome.
Yes. And
You've heard it from the professional, everyone.
yeah, right.
More
And
than possible.
that's right. And the person, they like themselves, right? So it's
Mm,
like they don't like that old person, and
right.
the harm, that the hurt that represented for them. And so, yeah, when
Right.
they're free, man, it, what joy and what freedom to
Yeah.
celebrate their integrity. And I do love that concept of sexual integrity, because it's
Mm,
universal for all of us, whether we're single or married, to live sexually with integrity,
that's
and
great.
not necessarily like the old script of purity has kind of been a wounded script,
Right. Yeah. For
because
sure.
it's like you are pure and you're not pure. It's a black and white, where it's
Mm-hmm.
integrity is a lifetime of stewardship,
Yeah.
um,
Yes.
of
That's so
living.
good. I think you talked about a little bit about that last
Okay,
time. That was
good.
so good. Yeah, I remember that now. You were talking about stewarding it and
Mm-hmm.
how we don't want to go in black and white
Yeah,
because then we're good or bad.
right, right, right.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
You said something, I forget what you said, but it kind of brought up another question that in the church, I think a lot of the times we hear or talk to marriages where sex is really used as a weapon,
Oh,
either withholding it,
yeah.
or like how do you expect me to stay pure if you don't have sex with me kind of conversations. I'm guessing you've heard that a lot too.
Yeah, the
um
pressure on the female to be her, to
yes,
do
most
her duty.
commonly. Yeah, to do her duty.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's never comes with like a bunch of like rage or anything, but there is this undercurrent sometimes when I talk to marriages of like, well, it's kind of like I just want your thoughts on this. It's kind of put on the woman to keep him pure.
Mm,
Does that make sense?
mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah. It does make
And
sense because it
yeah.
started with even youth group talks of women, of girls. Make sure you dress
Yep.
modestly because you're
Yep.
responsible for your brother's
Right. Right.
lustful.
Yeah. It starts from like, yeah, middle school,
Exactly.
church. Yeah. It starts
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
youth group. Yeah.
Yeah. So, can you ask your question one more time? So
I would just be curious what you would say to like a couple who, we'll just say it's a man, because most commonly this is the situation where he's saying, how do you expect me to be pure if you don't
mm,
meet my expectations?
mm, mm,
Right?
mm,
Like, where do you start with a marriage that feels, well,
mm,
no woman wants to be a meter of expectation. No, I mean,
mm.
that's not what we were
Right.
looking for when we got married.
Right.
And so, how would you start with a couple who, and also like women withhold?
Yes.
And so and so how would you work with a couple where sex is used at maybe weapons too strong, but it's used as it's not a
Yeah.
light, fun thing. It's used
Yeah.
as a tool.
So I would have to start with the idea of, well, one, that the way that that even is spoken is just so harmful.
Right.
Just the words itself. But
Right.
I would
I
probably start with the concept of attachment and like
Okay.
how is this couple actually attaching, connecting together? Like is say maybe one classic attachment pattern would be he would be avoidant emotionally, not able to share emotions,
Okay.
but the
Yeah.
way he feels loved and connected is sexually, right? He can
Okay.
speak that language without words. And
Right.
so
Okay.
he's more avoidant, whereas she's more um well, she could be avoidant also, but she can any combination of maybe a pleaser mode. I'll please
Uh-huh.
you. If you're
Yep.
happy, I'm happy. But the
Yes.
more I please you through my life, and this man, I've sat with so many couples and wives that I have pleased you all my life sexually, and I
Yeah.
could care less whether I ever have sex again because it's
Yeah.
always been just for you. And I might have mentioned this last time,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the idea that the attachment and how they're
And by
connecting,
attachment, do you mean like how they attach to each other, or how they're attaching to
how
sex?
they're attaching to each other is helpful to understand.
Gotcha.
And
Gotcha. Okay.
so,
So he might, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So he's saying, I want to love you because this is how I love you.
yes, and then
And she's like, please, no more love.
yeah, and she's either
Right.
exactly like
Right.
that's just
Right.
not how
Okay.
I
Yeah.
feel. That's not how I feel
Right.
loved.
Right.
Or maybe an ambivalent attachment, whereas I want to be close to you, but I also don't trust you because you've hurt me so
Yeah.
much. And we've been married for
Yeah.
20 years and there's just a pile load of hurt.
Yep.
And in this area, you haven't considered how
Mm.
I awaken, only your
Yeah.
own awakening, et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera. So there's resentments, there's
Mm-hmm.
bitterness, there's the lack of yeah, true grace and
Yeah.
compassion for each other's differences. Number one, only 21% of couples have the same sex desire. 79
Okay.
of us
Wow.
have a different desire.
Interesting.
And
Wow.
and there's different types of desire. And so
Hmm.
to normalize and to understand, so maybe in that situation where the wife feels the husband has a language of negativity of inviting his wife to be sexual in a very negative
Yeah.
and
Yes.
her heart
Yeah.
is not going to open up to that
Nope.
um, because she's created with a desire that's a receptive desire.
Hmm.
Okay, so he has a desire that's more of your drive, that
Yep.
it's like I'm going to think about chocolate all day today because I love chocolate. I
Right. Right.
I that's how he is, where
Yep.
she's not thinking about chocolate, maybe she is, but she's not
Right.
thinking about it. But if he suggests that she think about chocolate and
Right.
like woo her and set up
Yeah.
the kind of the stage, if you will,
Yeah.
for opening her heart, then she
Yeah.
can open her body. And it's
Right.
so there's one fun way of saying this. Men connect to their hearts through their happy place. Women connect to their happy place through their
Through
hearts.
their
And it's
hearts.
so it's
Yeah.
different. And
Mm.
so knowing now there are some men that have a receptive desire where they
Yeah.
need their wives to touch them or to
Yep.
initiate, affection before they get
Yeah.
aroused also. So it's not universal where it's just male
Right.
driven. Um,
Right.
but to again go back to talking about what is it that actually inspires me to connect with you and to be
Right.
vulnerable with you, to open my very private self to you
Yeah.
and give you
Yeah.
hospitality. So,
Yeah.
strengthening their attachment is crucial where they can move into a secure attachment with each other where both people feel felt and seen and heard
Yeah.
and have the freedom of autonomy that
Yeah.
that they can
Yeah.
both be different and still be accepted, be different and still
Mm-hmm.
come into community with each other and bless each other, but not be dependent on propping up
Right.
the other person. When we
Right.
get in a mode of propping up, so in that
Yeah.
situation I hear the husband demanding the wife prop him up. When we
Gotcha.
get into that dynamic,
Oh,
and
interesting.
that's
Yeah.
that's called differentiation, the inability
Okay.
to be differentiated, meaning
Oh.
I need you to prop me up or
Mm-hmm.
to tell me I'm good enough or to
Yep.
tell me who I am. And the minute that pressure is on, say, the spouse and the wife in this situation,
Yeah.
it will totally diminish desire. It will shut down
100%.
desire
Yep.
and actually inspire her to just move away from her husband,
Right.
disconnect versus connect. And
Right.
so if he's like, "Hey babe, I just really desire you tonight and I hope you have enough energy cuz and this is a
Mm-hmm.
good time. If it's not, let me know and I'm okay
Mm-hmm.
with either way, right?"
Yeah.
And it's the
He's okay. He's a big boy.
he's a
Yeah.
big boy and
He doesn't need propped up. Yeah.
exactly. Then the wife can go,
Yeah.
"Ooh, that's attractive and I want to
Right.
I want to give hospitality to that." But
Right.
not
Right.
not if it's the other way. So the book that's coming out, The Secrets,
Yeah.
it's going to address some of that. It's a
That's
great
so
great
good.
resource.
With the 79, what is it, 79% of us
Yeah,
that are different,
yeah.
it, where would you say to draw, okay, like, let me think of how to phrase this. Okay, this is it. When do you work hard for your spouse to try and meet them on their, I forget how you phrased it, but like in their different approach to sex? And then when does it just become performance and faking and not really being like honored
Mm, yeah,
for your difference? What's the healthy line there? Like, let's say, and I'm not talking about like crazy stuff. I'm just talking like, what if he wants, you know, I'm sure you have more scenarios you could come up with, but like, when does it become unhealthy
yeah,
to like change and try, right?
yeah.
Like, let's say he wants her to dress up for, in some
Mm,
outfit or whatever.
mm-hmm.
Doesn't do anything for her. She does it, but to please him, like, there has to be some, like in every part of marriage, there has to be some give, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when does the give start to like break
Mm-hmm.
down the soul of the person?
Yeah, yeah. Good question. So I like the concept of two parts coming together to create a sum. And
Yes.
that
Okay.
sum is the blending of the two parts. It's not one part over the other part. It's not like
Right.
it's a blend, it's a sum.
Yeah.
And so for every couple, creating their sum is going to be uniquely different for them. And
Mm-hmm.
so if one partner, say, let me just do a very benign concept.
Great.
If one partner wants to snuggle and cuddle to go to sleep at
Yeah.
night, and the other
Yeah.
one just can't go to sleep snuggling and
Yeah.
cuddling,
Right.
that partner that longs for that snuggle and cuddle, their only choice is to grieve. They have to let it go. They have to
Mm.
grieve, and the finality of grief
Mm.
is an acceptance, is getting to the place of acceptance. Oh, my
Huh.
partner just can't sleep with cuddling. I'm gonna like have an extra pillow that I can cuddle with instead.
Yeah.
Like
Okay. Yeah.
so
So you would say you need to grieve that.
you need to grieve that.
Not you wouldn't tell the other person you just got to try and do it 3 nights a week.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not
Oh,
at all.
interesting.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so it's not a compromise situation. That's
No. Compromise
okay.
is never,
This is helpful.
no, I don't care for compromise. Compromise to me,
My therapist Randy, who introduced me to you, says the exact same thing.
yeah. Compromise it's somebody's just really missing out, or both of them. Actually,
Yeah.
both probably are
Both. Yeah.
missing out,
Yeah.
and the connection isn't made there. So what other connection? Maybe they have a nap time where he gets to experience her cuddling, spooning with him, and she doesn't really need to sleep, but she can just lay there and let him have his nap while she spoons with him. Like there's ways to invite a creative, maybe blessing that longing,
Yeah.
but yet
Yeah.
if it's really aversive to her to
Yeah.
cuddle or spoon, like by all
Right.
means, there's other things that
That's a really, really good
and
example.
why is
Yeah.
that so important to him? Like what about that? And where
Right.
did it come from? What in his story?
Yes. I remember this now. You talked about this last time. This was really interesting. How, like, why is that the thing?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
we have to look back and be
Yes.
like, why is this so important?
Mhm.
So you're saying if the wife doesn't want to dress up in a maid's outfit or whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah.
that's something he might need to grieve.
Yes, absolutely.
And you wouldn't tell her, like, maybe once a year at Christmas or whatever.
If she wants to do that and she can have some
Yeah.
integrity, her own self-respect there, and that's fun for
Yeah.
her, and it's
Right.
playful, absolutely. Like,
Sure,
mean,
yeah, but if she just can't stand the thought of
if
it,
she can't stand
like,
the thought of it, then
yeah,
that needs to just be grieved
okay.
and move on.
This is such a really beautiful, like, way that you're saying it, like, in grief, because we do this in other parts of marriage too, I think.
Sure.
And I love that you're using it in a positive sense. Like, we grieve and we could still connect. But we're not always going to be 100% of the time get what we want.
Right.
And it's okay to grieve that.
Yes.
And can we grieve that without punishing the other person?
Well, that'd be the hope for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, with grief comes anger, and anger is a normal, godly emotional response. It can be, right? That something's wrong, something's not right. Well, is this really wrong or not right? And no, is our anger like, a self-indulgent, like we're pity party or whatever, or are we really caring for the soul of each other? Are we really
God has to go back to that.
really blessing and seeing each other's beauty? Yeah.
That's really, really good.
With someone that demands from the other something that there's a lot of relationship issues there that need to be unpacked.
Okay. Yeah, that's so good. Okay. Last one, recovering from infidelity sexually. Because I would imagine it's a different recovery than the emotional part. Maybe they're not. I would just be curious, how would you start to walk a couple through that? Where now, like, let's say we've been picking on the guys. We'll say she cheated, right? How does he open himself up back again sexually with that level of betrayal? Because that's brutal.
Right. Yeah. Great question. So the betrayal trauma is real. It is, it's more descriptive. Post-traumatic stress disorder is probably the most descriptive of what that feels like to have a intimate betrayal, affair in the relationship. And so, or porn, either one, both of them are intimate betrayals. And so, well, that's such a complex. It's a big question.
I know. I tried last time to get you to give me so many formulas, and you're like, I don't know it. There's so much nuance to it all, which is why I also love talking with you, because you're like, there's not formulas every time.
Yeah, no, there really isn't. For sure, they probably would benefit from therapy, right? A trained CSAT certified sex addiction therapist. or spousal, the ones for spouses. But
Mm-hmm.
so reclaiming what you're talking about there is reclaiming their sexuality within their union, right? That idea
Right,
is like,
right,
how
exactly.
do they get to that place? And
Mm-hmm.
there's going to be, it's going to be unique to each couple. We
Mm-hmm.
usually, when there is an addiction happening, we, well, pretty universally, we invite the addict to have a 90-day sobriety from any
Okay,
sexual
great.
acting out, any at all,
Great.
self
Okay. Yep.
touch, or,
Yep. Okay. No, this is good. Like the practicals are
right,
helpful.
right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the brain, in order for the brain to start getting rewired, it needs a total fast. And
Mm-hmm.
then, but when the addict is, invited to do that, it also means that the spouse is a part of that fast, which
Right.
which
Right.
which can be a very healing, freeing
Yeah.
experience, because there's the whole like pressure to be sexual together is put on the shelf, and
Right.
now there's freedom to explore other ways of connecting with each other, ways
That's great.
ways to truly have intimacy that
Yeah.
that expands beyond just the genital focus. And so
Right.
um, one helpful tool for couples that Dr. Laser created and Deborah was phonos, which is, touching in on each other daily with an
Mm-hmm.
acronym with phonos, which is feeling. How are you feeling today? What
Mm-hmm.
did you observe today? What do you need today? What can you affirm about yourself today? And
Hmm.
the S would be sobriety. How's your sobriety today? And
Okay.
doing that on a daily basis, especially in those 90-day fasts, can be so beneficial to expand and create an emotional safety for the
Right.
couple where trust
Right.
can start. I think of like affair or betrayal as like a bucket and the bottom's been blown out of that bucket. And then
Yeah.
in those 90 days, there's kind of a bottom that can be put back in the bucket just because you're showing up different, you're showing up
Right.
consistent, you're showing up faithful, which is a key
Yes.
concept.
Yeah.
And now
Yeah.
the bucket has somewhat of a bottom, and now the we can drip trust in it. And over time
Mm,
that trust builds up to the point of now I have
mm,
enough.
yeah.
I'll use the metaphor of lubrication or water in that bucket for me
Yeah.
to actually open myself up to you sexually. And
Yeah.
but when that bucket's dry, there's no way.
Yeah.
If it
It
represents
won't work.
your
Yeah.
soul, your spirit, and the
Yeah.
wounding, it has to have some water in
Mm,
that bucket. And so it's a beautiful journey to
mm-hmm.
navigate that with a couple and to decide when the fast is going to be broken and whether both
Yeah.
partners are ready for that fast to be broken, and to talk about it, set it up, like what is it
Mm-hmm.
going to look like, where is it going to
Okay, so
be.
you would advise like just get a little practical, a
Very
little clinical with
practical.
it when you're starting back up again.
Absolutely. Oh, for
Okay,
sure.
that's great.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it can't be it is not lightly treated. It moves
Right.
into a sacred component.
Okay.
Or,
Yeah.
and I love, so going back to one of the books I recommended, When Two Become One, what I love
Yeah.
about that book is the first half is all about integrating our sexuality with our spirituality. And that
Mm-hmm.
when they cannot be divorced from each other, they are
Mm,
intricately connected. And so
yeah.
when we can move, a couple can move into that idea that their sexuality is holy and sacred, and and McCluskey talks about that it's representing either the God who created it, who meant for it to be
Mm-hmm.
the most beautiful thing, this side of heaven,
Right.
or whether the kingdom of darkness and Satan are
Yeah.
being worshiped because it's perverted. And so
Right.
when we step out of that fast into this sacred space, we're reclaiming our sexuality as a sacred, holy,
So
beautiful gift that we give each other. And
So
it's a new experience. It's
Yeah.
such a new whole person experience when you integrate the psychological, social, spiritual element of it, instead of just the biological, animalistic kind of bent that was known before the recovery started.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so good. Oh, Teri, as always, you are just too much fun to talk to. I love how I like put words out there and then you come back with these like beautiful phrases and all the terminology. And every single time I feel like I walk away, from a talk with you very happy and
I'm so
positive.
glad.
And I think you really have that ability to make what can be a very heavy subject. Like my husband and I have done marriage conferences,
Yeah.
and when it goes to sex, it's just like a dark cloud sometimes in the room, right? Like there's so much heaviness around it, and there's so much history around it, and and so you just make it so beautiful. You address the hard things, but always just layer with so much hope, so much sacredness. I just appreciate you so much for doing this. This one's going to come out really soon too.
Okay.
So
Great.
I hope someday we can meet in person.
I do too.
But until then,
lovely.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right.
So
Bless
much.
you.
Bless you.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye-bye.